Hello and welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It also goes out on my YouTube channel, as well as the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page and YouTube channel. So lots of places that you can tune in. I do suggest that you look at the archive videos of my YouTube channel because Facebook, after 30 days, gets rid of any videos that are live videos that are posted. So that's your best resource. This is year 9 of Wednesdays with Willa. So you've got lots of treasure trove of information relating to spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, and more. And it's always wonderful to be able to have a beautiful discussion with my guests. And today we're going to have a wonderful discussion about soul progression of the client, the mediumship client. And so those of you who are interested in mediumship readings, whether you are a medium, a developing medium yourself, or if you are a client, this is going to be a great show to break things down for you. And I have on the show today, Laura Wooster. How are you doing today?
Hi, Will. It's so good to see you. And congratulations on 9 years. I was doing a silent applause in the background when you said 9 years. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations. What a great run. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing how fast it's gone. And I'm so grateful that I have great people like you that come onto the show to share about things. For those of you who don't know who Laura is, she is an intuitive medium from Massachusetts. She's also a minister with the Journey Within Church located in New Jersey. And she has her own podcast known as The Intuitive Life. So you can check her out there. And she's a certified medium with the Forever Family Foundation. So she's been able to really help people in her path as a medium. And today she's come on the show to discuss those very things, especially as it relates to the client. I know when we were getting ready for the show, it was something along the lines of, well, the client goes through a transformational process. Yes, we have the spirit communicators that go through whatever they need to learn and grow and be. But there is a natural progression that starts to occur with clients. Certain clients start to take things and take the ball and run with it and develop their own self spiritually. So let's dive into that today. I'll always think of it as kind of stages that a client will go through as they work through grief, but also as they see themselves more and more as a soul. So, what would you like to start with today?
Yeah, it's I know we started talking about this on the phone, and this is something we could really dive into in a very deep way. But like we were talking about, a lot of times the initial interaction with a medium is my loved one okay?
Mhm.
Help me get through my grief. The in helping to alleviate the pain that they're feeling with the separation of the physical loss of their loved one. But I think a lot of people I found, not all the time, but a lot of times they're surprised by that really strong like wake up towards the spiritual side of life and what it means to them. So that's how we started the conversation on the phone.
Yes, yes, because they are opening up to that version of themselves. Maybe up to that point, they may mainly been focused on their mundane living. I call it the chop wood, carry water scenario. The gurus call it the householder, right? And the idea of you have to carry a job, a career, family, all of those components, the generational understanding of support that we have to offer people, and can sometimes be caught up in the worldliness of all of this. And then someone passes, someone significant to us passes, and it can be that wake up call to say, I would like to understand more about the unseen world because so much is happening in this particular reality. And I'd like to connect with my loved ones in spirit. And a medium is a beautiful resource for that. That translator, if you will, of this language of spirit and bringing through the essence of a spirit communicator. And over time, you and I and many mediums, we see how our clients are progressing spiritually. So maybe initially when they first come, they're dealing with their grief, they're trying to figure out where they fit in all of this and how they can continue the communication with their loved ones. So often I feel like I'm talking myself out of a job on purpose because I want to
Me too.
empower the client so that they can witness more of the communication with their loved ones in spirit. But to do that effectively means actually developing their own soul, their own um, purposeful awareness of the divine in their lives and how that is incorporated. And so there's this soul progression in the unfolding of a person's spiritual awareness. So clients initially have this questioning mode that they're in. This, I'm in shock, but I have questions,
Yeah.
right? You see this too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's I can kind of see when, especially if I oftentimes I just do phone readings, so I don't do a lot of in person, but when I do them, the light comes up in their eye, like, well, if this is true, that my loved one can connect with me in this way, what does it mean for all the other parts of my life?
Yes.
And they can kind of start to see it kind of rippling out to different parts of their life, that it kind of shakes people up. It shakes up their belief of what the world is actually all about.
Right. So that is what's known as the awakening stage
Yeah.
for the client. They're starting to notice synchronicities. They're starting to notice those intuitive nudges. They have a desire for a deeper meaning to things. And so that's a really important stage when they're kind of in that curiosity, right? There's a spiritual curiosity during that awakening stage with a client. And so maybe initially they're wanting understanding about their loved one in spirit. Are they okay? Am I going to be okay? All of those things. But over time, they start to shift into wanting purpose. They're not looking for predictions or platitudes or anything like that. They're seeking and they're wanting purpose. And that's a huge sign of spiritual progression, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And sometimes people struggle with that. It might take years for them to come to that point of recognizing, I want something more than what I'm experiencing right now. I want to give back to life in a different way. And I was talking with someone the other day, um just by just I'm using my I'm lost
The
my words.
synchronicity that you were talking to someone else about, that's very cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they had lost someone very dear to them, their spouse, a couple of years ago, and it really put them on a different path of recognizing, I need to step away from the work, my life work now, and move in a different direction, and to give back to people who are also have been through this, and to dedicate their time to helping people in that way, and helping people with grief support, and most likely was not something they would have ever done before.
True.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so it really has, so it really does prompt an introspection that may take a couple of years or even or more to
Mhm.
really understand where that's leading you.
Because it's going from what will happen to me, right? Because you're in the grief, you're like, what's going to happen to me?
Mhm.
What's going to happen to my loved one? How are we supposed to go on after the shipwreck of this? It shifts from that to how can I participate in my own growth? How can I help the world? So there is a um, soul maturity, I guess you could say, that starts to happen. There's a bit
Yeah,
of ripening on the vine
yeah,
that occurs.
yeah,
And it's so beautiful to see that unfold. And as you were saying earlier, you, well, I do Zooms. I do phone, but I do Zooms and in persons. And when you look into someone's eyes and you can see that they're having a transformation right in front of you, that
yeah,
they know you're connecting with their loved one because you brought through the essence of that spirit communicator. That's what I focus on. And so you may have their mannerisms. You may have described them perfectly. You may bring through the personality and words they choose and the way they think about things. And then that shifts in the client. They're like, oh my goodness, I can still feel that love. I can still have that connection.
Mhm.
Now that I can get through that, what's next? And
Yeah.
I'm glad that humans are curious. We need to have the stage of curiosity about
Yeah.
those things. So many clients, after they've had a mediumship reading, will book a teaching consultation with me. And people book those for a wide variety of reasons, but many it's because they're wanting to understand what they can do for their next step. And they've got questions about spiritual evolution. And it's so fun to do those teaching consultations because you can see how they're wanting to move through their healing and start to integrate things.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. And it's really what's really interesting about that process too, is the sort of like this gradual releasing of fear of living,
Yeah. Yeah.
and recognizing that this is not it. This is like I have plenty of time. If I don't get it done now, I can do it later in the other side. There's a sense of like not of releasing fear about really living life as you really want to
Yeah.
and not missing out on the joy of life. And so I know a lot of people figure like we both work with people in grief and people who've passed. And so many times people have, said to me that don't really understand the process. They're struggling to understand it. Like, how can you be all, it must be so disheartening to talk about death all the time. I'm like, no, we're talking about life.
Yes, it's the living spirit that
Exactly.
we're involved with, and I think that's important for people to have that shift. I would say that the next comes the healing stage for people after they've had this awakening. They move more into a healing stage. They're starting to release old patterns, relationships, or beliefs that no longer serve them. Many of them are having to totally find a new identity to some extent. Maybe they had been a caregiver and that had become all consuming. And now they have to figure out
Mhm.
who they want to be after this. You know, they're like, I'm not actively in a role as a spouse anymore or as a child to my parent anymore. I'm not actively in that physical world reality space of this. Who am I supposed to be now?
Yeah.
And they because they've gotten used to the habit of that pattern, so there's a healing that has to happen through that. And it's interesting to me how the loved ones in spirit, they're always rooting for them. They're
Mhm.
like, hey, we see you're doing this. We see, even though that this is a trial or tribulation or difficulty, we see how you're transcending it because of some spiritual foundational work that you're doing.
Yeah. And
So
they've got
yeah, that's a
a lot of,
common refrain, and they're specific. We see it in this patterning. We see how you're doing it this way, how you're reacting to so and so in this capacity, where in the past you would have reacted this way. And
Mhm.
that's what you're seeing too, right?
Yeah, yeah. They'll say, I see, we see that you're doing this and that. And what I love too is at times, like most of the time, I'll get one communicator at a time coming through, right? But when they start to come kind of gather a little bit more, like you'll feel their people coming together and pull together, not as a singular entity or singular communicator, but as a group and
Yes.
say, we see what you're doing now and we're here for this.
Yeah,
It's just it's so moving,
it
It's
really is. It's like, not that everybody's going through the Olympics, but sometimes it feels like that and the pressure. And they're not there to just be voyeurs. They're there to, to show up in the moments where you're needing the upliftment, when you're needing to know that they're cheering you on, where they see how people are really acting, and there's an empowerment that starts to happen through this. That's what I try to do as a spiritual medium, but also what the spirit communicators are effectively trying to help a person process through. So a lot of times messages from spirit are about validating a client's inner knowing, and it's about that the loved ones in spirit encouraging growth instead of dependency.
That's there you go. That's a
Yeah.
big thing.
And because so often they're like, I'm dependent on so and so to tell me what to do. My husband always did this. My mom always would help me through this. Like they're all these things, my sister, whatever it is. And it's hard because you're like, I don't want to do this by myself anymore. I don't like this.
It's perfectly natural to have that temper tantrum, you know?
Exactly. Right. So, but
Yeah.
then after that point, like, it's like you can feel okay. All right.
Yeah.
I am going to shift into this. And what I see in my mediumship readings is that they can act as soul checkpoints, like where are we now on
Yeah.
things? And the the parent or the spouse or the child or the friend can say, I see where you're at on this. And I can see beautiful things that you're working forward with and keep going. And so that's like a checkpoint. Would you describe it as that too?
Yeah, yeah, checking in. Because I don't know about you, but oftentimes I'll have people come in for their initial appointment, and then a year later, I always say try to leave a year between appointments, right? So they'll come in a year and
At
they'll
least 6 months. Yeah.
at least, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can vary. Um, but for the people who've come back several times, maybe 3 times, 4 times over a span of like 5 years, it's just interesting how each appointment is a little bit different. It's so wonderful to see the progression of the client in that time frame, as an example. And to have their loved ones come in and support them in that growth and the expansion of their own soul. And so it's fascinating. I love it. It's one of the best ways to work with people. And I think sometimes people are surprised because they expect to have the same experience initially that they had. Like, oh, it was so nice when my dad came in and we had a really, I had so many, he was such a fun guy. We had so much fun and it was wonderful to laugh again and with him and everything. But then they come back again, hoping to have the same experience. And like, oh, well, let's talk about, your dad comes in but he's like, but here you are. We're talking about something different now. We're
Yeah.
talking about what you're doing, not what it
Hmm.
was like with me. And
Right.
sometimes people are like, okay. And some people are like, why am I not having the same experience as I had before? And so how do you address that? Like when they
So,
expecting completely
uh,
same experience?
I think that's a valid point, because I honestly don't remember what's come through for a client before. No clue. It's like I just a clean
Yes,
slate, and I tell people,
very
I'm like,
rarely.
I
Yeah.
I don't remember much about things, so I just have let it go. But the client will report to me their shifts, their changes, and if
Mhm.
it does, once you've gone through and you've gotten great evidence and you've had those kinds of things, that is still very much part of a next reading. But then you're right, there's a pivot. There's a pivot into what are the client's soul needs. And so, with my advanced students, even right now, we're doing a soul centered mediumship class for my advanced students, and I'm explaining how at that point there's a shift. What is the sitter's soul needs? What is it that spirit's wanting to address in those ways? On Honestly, it's always about what the client decides to do in their own life because we have free will, and that's always very much supported by the people in spirit and by people who are spiritual mediums and want to address it from that standpoint. But sometimes they have their opinions, they have their ideas of how things can be, and we have to have the client weigh that for themselves. So after we've gone through this awakening stage and then there's this healing, they're releasing things that no longer serve them, then they're in this place of integration. And that's when, um, after those sitter soul needs are addressed, there's this place of, oh my goodness, I can see where I can apply these spiritual insights to everyday life, to my boundaries that I need to have, the choices I'm making, the relationships I'm having with others. And for me, as a spiritualist medium, that's where spiritualism really shines. Our spiritual natural laws, I'm teaching a class right now about that actually, of living the laws of spirit. So it's that integration of those spiritual natural laws, you can actually apply them. They're not just theory, they're living into your life at that point. And that's where I see people really have effective changes. And
Mhm.
so that's where a mediumship reading can pivot into a teaching consultation
Yeah. Hmm.
during that time. But seeing a client who has really started to apply those spiritual insights, it's amazing. Like spirit will be like, we see you did this. You actually were in faith prayer instead of worry prayer with this scenario and situation, and we see how you're more calm when other people are bringing their stuff, like whatever it is. And
Yeah.
so it's the integration stage is very much a key because at that point they're no longer seeking and searching for reassurance as much as they're seeking empowerment. So that's what I would say happens during that integration stage. It's they're not as much about, well, do they like what they see, are they proud of me? They're like, oh, I feel empowered, I see how I've been given this perspective. You can't take shortcuts about this either. Like if
Right.
people are trying to rush these stages, can't do
That's so true.
no shortcuts. But these are the things that help to give clients perspective and effective growth. And while spirit will often offer nudges, it's really up to the client to walk the path.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure you probably had the same experience too, where some people like fully like in for it, like, okay, I'm ready. And then some are like being dragged kicking and screaming through this whole process, which
Well, what it is they're upset. And as I explain to clients and to students, when a person is upset, they're angry, they're saddened, their energy is very contracted. I mean, it might get spiky like a porcupine fortress, but
yeah,
it's easier to connect with spirit when we're in a joyful centered place. It's
yeah,
just there's an ease to it. I
yeah.
mean, I
But
was
it
just
takes
watching the
time.
Olympics with the ice skaters, and the ice
Oh,
skaters that are really nice and relaxed and just having a playful time of it. They're like,
I had the same thought.
let's do my spin and my double axel, and woo, they look like
Woo.
effortless.
Yeah. There was a
And the
joy
body's
to
really
it.
loose and everything versus the other ones are they're just tight and they're like,
Yes.
oh, you can tell their bodies, the commentary people can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You
so
can
funny.
see
We
it.
were watching the same thing. And I love to watch the figure skaters just for that reason. Because I
Mhm.
just don't see that with I mean, I know we're talking about clients, but we see it with our students when they're contracted and fearful that they're going to get things wrong. They're not going to, properly interpret information from spirit. They get all, I was like, so I've been thinking about using that same analogy of the ice skater, of Alyssa Liu to be precise.
Yes, she wasn't fantastic. Oh,
Brilliant. And just she's a perfect example of just being open to the joy of connecting to the music, connecting
yeah.
to movement,
And
connecting
it
to
was
your
like watching a
spirit.
little girl on the ice or something, because
Yeah,
she has such a youthful joy. Um, it was just beautiful to see. And
yeah,
you could tell she was completely in that space of having this unified experience with her soul, right?
yeah. She wasn't attached to any outcome, which is a huge thing when it comes to whether it be connecting to a loved one for a client or being the medium yourself,
Yes.
um, or connecting to your own people. She was not attached to the outcome, which was a really freeing place to be in, a joyful place. She was there in the moment, literally in the
And
moment.
when we see people do that, not just in figure ice skating, but like when we see that in mediumship, you can tell the difference because people can lie, but energy doesn't.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So that's how that shows up. And so that integration of it is so amazing. And then there's another stage. But before we get there, is there anything else you wanted to say about integration?
Um, no, no, I mean, I think for anybody who might be watching this and saying, well, how do I integrate? How do I make this quicker? Like you said, you can't rush the process. You have to allow it to be what it is. And it can be a very gradual back and forth, releasing two steps forward, one step back,
Oh, yeah.
releasing fear, acceptance, going back and forth and just and being fearful one moment and then kind of gravitating backwards a little bit and recognizing it is a dance, and
Mhm.
not something that just turns up overnight. And yeah, so and that's the thing, it's wonderful to witness that with people who, in spite of being scared, in spite of being concerned about where life is going, how they're going to get through this, they still manage to get up every day and do this. And it's just a wonderful, like really soul affirming thing to watch when someone does that. And you're not alone, just not. And that's the one thing is what this is all about, is when their loved ones show up and say, we see your progress, we see what you're going through, we see you're still struggling with me not being there, yet I still see you getting up every day. So,
And I tell people the best way to honor your loved one who has passed, is to honor their life by honoring your life. That's what they want to see. When
yes,
you honor your life and you're living from that place, that there's a fullness to the spirit. Everybody has their wounds, they have the things that they're carrying. But when you see someone who is transcending that level, you can tell the difference in them, that
yeah,
there is a wisdom, a spiritual poise that
mhm,
is coming over them. So again, these stages that we're talking about today, the awakening stage, the healing stage, the integration, that doesn't necessarily happen over the course of a year. We're talking years plural.
yeah,
And
yeah,
for what I've observed within myself and with clients, that integration stage, it does kind of ebb and flow depending on what else is happening in their life.
mhm,
So, as they're starting to fine tune their own self care, their own on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level, they may be saying, you know what, I need to take a walk every day and commune with nature. I need to sit in quiet, not necessarily the full shebang of meditation if you don't want to, but sit in the quiet and just breathe and be at ease with myself. Just ease into my life instead of having a frenetic quality to it, so that then you can greet others from that more balanced place. And so for others, the integration stage is um, having to deal with other people and finding a good way to do it. So that's where the energetic boundaries that we were talking about earlier, right? They have to say, oh, I see that why this person is acting this way. I get to choose my reaction to this.
right,
I'm going, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, I'm going to choose my spiritual response. So if you can have some buffers in your day that are going to help you to integrate this. I'm a big fan of spiritual food. And what I mean by that is the walks in nature, but also like read a sentence or two from a devotional, and you'll just feel the deliciousness of it, and it'll reaffirm and get you back to your spiritual foundations. We always want to go back to that sacred space. So the integration, I think, is very much a conscious awareness. We're having self-awareness, but then we're moving to self-discipline
yeah, yeah,
so that we can eventually move to self mastery.
yeah, yeah, and recognizing what you spiritually need, and then and having the strength to say yes to that. And that's sometimes a big deal for people, is being able to say yes to what they need spiritually, because at times it can for some people it can appear to be selfish, and it's not. It's really tuning into who we really are, and remaining in groundedness in your life, and keep and maintaining that groundedness in your life, so you can fully show up for people, show up for the world. And so that's the one thing I think I see a lot of people struggling with, especially caregivers coming out of a caregiving situation when they've lost someone they've caregiven, or having to respond to parents that they've always had to respond to in a certain way, and all these things. And it's but it's it's a wonderful thing to witness, though, at the same time, when people fully show up for that.
Yes, it's about embracing the humanness of it all, but trying to have sense of humor about
Yeah,
life to some
have to,
extent. And
have
and
to.
so sometimes people, I would say on average, around the age of 55 to 65 is when people this starts to hit for most people.
Mhm.
They're having mortality issues for themselves, for their nearest and dearest people have been passing. Not that you can't have it younger, it's just that on average, that
And
seems to be.
typically there's Saturn return around there too. So
Sure.
that's, yeah,
Exactly. And so that questing starts to happen. And
yeah.
during that integration process, there's a fullness of having to tread water. Like you feel like I'm having to tread water to keep my head above water during that time. And so sometimes people will start to go back to church. I have to say, like, that's a time where people start to go back to their beginnings. They can feel their grandma who used to be really into the church is going, get to church. So it can be very helpful for people in that regard. Maybe it's the church of their family, but maybe it's a new kind of church. Maybe it's a spiritualist church. Maybe it's something along those lines that they start to feel this really clicks and helps to bring me some healing and peace for the rest of my week.
Mhm.
And so I'm so glad that we have places like that where we can have fellowship with others that are also realizing they're on a sacred journey, a sacred path, and everybody's developing at their own individual rate.
Mhm.
And it is very inspiring to, as much as people say, oh, when we pass, we know it all. No, you don't. They're
No,
also, spiritual progression is eternal and infinite.
yeah.
And so there's always something more to grow and learn and be. And so it is here on this earth plane. And sometimes the person in spirit will say, hey, I saw you just took a class about such and such. I was there with you. I thought that was so cool and I was learning too.
Yeah.
And they've never had interest in any of that before.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
because they're coming from a different perspective. Yeah.
yeah, so it's who's living vicariously through whom? It sometimes becomes the question, but it's so fun to see that mediumship really does support soul progression for the spirit loved ones, but also for the client.
Yeah, and another point, not to get too far off topic as well, but to kind of go back to people start to search out church and fellowship. But it doesn't always have to be a religious organization. It can be finding a soul group or a community that
Yes.
you can connect with that makes that you have similar goals in life, even if it's not exactly the same, that you can support each other. So that in
Mhm.
itself is spiritual support in some way, spiritual community, even if it's not necessarily a church, a synagogue, a temple, or something like that. So I know people start to search, and it's so important. It's like we know that how important biologically community is needed for our own physical health. So we're wired for it.
We are, and energetically, with our chakras and how we are divinely constructed, we do have a need to figure out who we are in relation to the family, into a tribe. And I have a wonderful group of students that really love each other so deeply and have been developing mediumship uh, for years together with me. And you could tell they're very, like you just said, there's this union of souls that's going on, and it's not that they're going to church on Sundays, but they're coming to class every week and they're feeling that upliftment. They're feeling that sense of fellowship and community of people of like mind, of like let's say like intention of development of mediumship, and they come from all walks of life, but they feel so much like a soul group. So when you find that, you'll know it'll just sort of click for you. And so it's a good point Laura's making about that as well, because it does happen. You start to transcend into it. Quick note before we talk about the last stage, or I don't know that's the last stage, but it's the last stage that we'll probably need to talk about in today's show. But the the understanding of what is going on energetically, just as a side note, a lot of times people are feeling like their personal power is under attack, in that solar plexus area, also down in the sacral chakra and root, and then the root chakra. Root's family survival issues are really activated for many people. And so in the sacral chakra, they're trying to figure out their identity as a spouse or as a parent or a child or, as a woman, as a man, like all the things are very much engaged in those lower three chakras during that time. You've probably observed this with people too. Yeah. And so when that's not running right, it's kind of like a washing machine that's loaded funny.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way I describe it.
Bang, bang.
Well, and you're like, oh, we gotta open it up and put things in a different way now.
Close
Energetically,
it up.
it starts to feel very off until you start to realize how you relate to that, so that you don't just feel like there's this sucker punch to the gut you've taken, that you realize that you can build up your power, your chi, however you want to term that, and that you can become reinvigorated, and that you don't have to be so far off center. And that takes time, but it takes um, an awareness every day that you're going to get up and you're going to thank God for help in your work, your play, and all of your day. That rhymes. And having that positive approach to what's going on can really help shift that energy internally and energetically, and then how it relates to the external life. But people are going through a lot of things when it comes to the grief. They are having to learn how to buffer energy again with people in that new reality. And it's a challenge. We're not saying it's not, but just know that spirit is really helping you on that path. Your loved ones want so much for you to develop and grow and ultimately not need them. Right? They want the autonomy of the soul. But these are patterns that Laura and I and other mediums have noticed through the years. But just should we move into that last stage, do you think? And
Yeah,
talk
let's
about
do
that? So the last stage, in my opinion, would be that embodiment stage. So we talked about the awakening stage, the healing stage, the integration stage, and now we're in the embodiment. So now a client is living from soul alignment rather than fear or habit, right? And in that space, their energy feels really grounded, it feels clear, it feels intentional. And that's when a client is coming back year after year, because so many of them do, they're not asking the same questions of, is my loved one okay, is everything going to be all right, or move past that, and they're asking better ones during that embodiment time, would you say? They're asking, they're not just integrating the work, they're consuming it. It's,
it.
they're like a
Yeah.
sponge to it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's an indication that things are moving forward. When the way that they ask the questions change and the questions they're asking are changing, it's not everybody gets to it in the same time frame, but it's like okay, they are integrating their lessons of what they've learned through this process of letting go of physical presence of someone, but also embracing the spiritual presence of them at the same time. So it's just so when they start to speak differently. They start to ask different questions. They start to see the world a little differently. They start to see their place in the world a bit differently. There was not too long ago, I was talking with a client. It was probably the second or third time I talked to them over, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so after a major loss in their life. And there, I had that sense of their people coming in as a group saying, we see what's happening here. And one of the things that they brought through for this person was that they witnessed the struggle of them feeling guilty for letting go of things that were traditional for their family and something that kind of was the glue for the family. But they recognized in their own life it wasn't bad for them. It wasn't that it was bad for them. It just didn't suit the road they were on. So they said, we see that you had trouble releasing that sense of almost like a betrayal to your family, but it was good that you let it go. And it wasn't anything bad. I think it was something to do with like where they were living. The family had lived there for generations. They were letting go
Yeah.
of that. Felt like they were betraying their family by moving to a completely different part of the world, living a different life. And so we saw you struggle through this. We saw you process that, and we saw you step forward in spite of that after you processed it. And we're so proud of you because this is what you were meant to do in this life. And And it wasn't that they weren't coming from a healthy place to begin. They were a healthy family. It's just a totally different experience for them. And so when they recognized that, it was like I almost took like heard their breath, like, yes, yes, I did. I struggled through that. So, and I did come to a resolution that this was what it settled in my soul. It settled in my soul. And I was like, yeah. And they see this and they're applauding you. And it was just those, it doesn't always happen that way, but it on occasion they do. And so so that's what we're always striving for. And as spiritualists, obviously, that continual evolution, even beyond the spiritual, the physical life, is we may not resolve all those things in the physical life, but we're always progressing towards that. So
Hmm. And I love that example. That has happened at times with clients as well. They have a guilt of the family traditions or how they're supposed to do things, and they're it's such a beautiful release that they are being given a a state of grace that they're able to enter into more when their loved one who was such a matriarch or a patriarch in the family gives them permission about this because maybe they've been carrying the guilt or somebody else in the living has been guilt tripping them. It just depends. Hey, we know your sister's doing this to you. Don't worry. Just ignore it. Parents are still parents on the other side.
the personality still has to come through.
Yeah, I did a reading for an 80-year-old woman, and her parents were still treating her like she was some little kid. Yeah, we know, we see this. So it's so cute. And as you could see um, in the client's face, she looked way younger when her parents talked to her that way. Do you know what I'm talking about? There
Oh
was
yeah,
a
see that.
radiance in her face, a youthfulness, not just a remembering of that, but it's almost like she remembered who she was and that version of herself that was always contained in her. So like, we could go on and on about all these things that we see, but it is a beautiful thing when they are given permission, or they are the struggles of what they have considered to be their identity and their family identity has shifted so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a classic example. And so clients will come back year after year for these very same changes that we're talking about, and for their own progression. It's not like we tell them to; they want to.
Yeah. Well, they start to see over time, and like you said, I don't always remember what the initial connection was, but the client lets us know. It's like, so this happened. But there's like this interesting recognition that happens for a lot of um, clients that might come to us is that they, initially it may have been them connecting with the personality, their earthly personality of their loved one, but then they start to see over time the soul personality or the soul of their loved one, which can be very different sometimes
Oh yeah, I
from,
call that version 2.0.
yeah. And then they can see them on both of those
Yeah.
levels, depending on the situation. And when people realize that, they go, oh, now I understand. And sometimes it's a concept that's a little difficult to grasp, that someone could be two things at once, the soul level and the personality level, the earthly level. But when that starts to come through a little bit more, and
Yeah, so it alters the relationship that the client has with that person who has passed. And so sometimes they're a better father, mother, spouse, child, whatever it is, they're a better version of themselves. And you can see how that shifts things for the client, their own soul progression and the way they're viewing their relationship with them. And when I say this is how your dad used to be, this is how he is, and he's a better father to you now because of this, and they're like, yes, I can feel that. And I do talk to him, and I couldn't have talked to him like this when he was here on the earth plane, but I can now. And there's such peace in their face when they say that.
yeah, it's almost like
There's,
they
oh,
knew that version of their person was always there, but they couldn't reach it, or
right. And that's so sad. You're like, oh, like, and in one level, you're like, I wish that they had been that for you when they were here, but there was stuff in the way, and
yeah,
now that's no longer in the way, and we have to accept that it was in that timing, But what a beautiful thing when we see a client graciously accepting someone and
Yeah.
forgiving them for their
Yeah.
trespasses. And that's part of the soul progression within the client, is what I've noticed. Yeah.
And to preface this too, there's gonna be people who cannot make peace with things that happened
Oh
in life.
yeah. Not everybody comes through automatically and apologizes. And
No,
so that's
no,
what
not meant
when
to.
that first happened, I was like, aren't you going to apologize? I said to the spirit communicator, you're like, no, I don't apologize. And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah, that's
what? You know, like the mom in me was like, what? Like, you better apologize. But you can't make any, if that's not their style, but also they just have to more progression. It's not like they passed, snapped the fingers, and their version 2.0. They sometimes have to shift through that. And then it's about with the client going, you know what? Like they come to a discovery of, I don't need them to apologize because I'm not going to carry this anymore.
that's right. Exactly. Yes.
So
And
that sometimes that's what has to happen. That's where the release happens. That's where the soul progression is for the client.
being
And
attached to be having giving permission from the parents or a an apology from the parents, that releasing the need for it is very, and that could be it could be different for everybody.
it
You know.
is absolutely. And I think that's where you can really see people having a big jump, a big leap from that awakening to the healing to the integration all of a sudden. And now, sometimes in the course of a reading, there are certain people that reach a version of embodiment. And it's really an honor and a blessing as a medium to see that happen
Mhm.
for a client. Sometimes it can happen in the course of a reading, but a lot of times it won't. It needs to happen over a course of different sessions, as we've already detailed. But it is a beautiful thing because spirit does walk with us through all of it. Like
Mhm.
the divine is walking with us through all of it and counseling us, guiding us, helping us to become um, you know, into that space of soul mastery. We just have to embrace it in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And to know that even though someone may be like, I like to use this analogy of someone supporting someone here, like riding a two-wheeler, and holding the back of the bike, and you don't always see them, but they're there, right? Even if you can't sense them there, that they're there to support you. And they're just going to hold in space, like, oh, I'm going to let go at just the right time so that
Yeah,
you can.
because that's another thing that can hold people back is they're like, but I don't feel them and I don't see them and like, well, you've been in the midst of doing X, Y, Z. How could you? Like, like
Right?
who has time at that point with all the things that have been on your plate? It's not
Yeah.
like you've actually been purposefully getting yourself calmed down. If you're the kind of person where you don't actually start to unwind until you finally get into bed at night and it takes you a while, you're having to kind of regress through the day a little bit and then progress through the day. I call it regress and then progress, right? And then you're like, oh, I kind of start to feel something. I'm half in, I'm half out, I'm asleep, I'm awake. And then I start to feel spirit. It's a huge indicator that through the rest of your day, there's no way, no how they were going to get through.
No, you have to live your life at the same time. Some people feel like there's almost this impression from some people that they need to feel the presence of their loved one consistently all the time, like throughout the day. I'm like, you're not living life. I mean, like that. I mean, if you just can't live life that way.
Yeah, having spirit contact 24/7 would be, in my opinion, an unhealthy thing because then you would not be living your life.
It's not good.
If you were just in that constant, hey, what do you think of this? Like all the time, not
Mhm.
cool. You would be ignoring the people in the living in your life if it was the case. If it's every now and then of, hey, I see you're here because I cooked this, or hey, you're going shopping with me now. I feel you. Oh, you're in the car. Yeah, don't tell me how to drive. Like, like stuff like that happens.
Oh
That's
yeah.
fine. But if it was like minute by minute, I do sometimes say this in a teasing way, but it's true. Um, you know, reality TV is edited because no one's life is that interesting. So even though your loved one in spirit does love you, they don't need to be there for every little instance. And you don't need them to be. You need to develop and cultivate your own connection with the divine, that soul space, that really understanding what it's like to be them. And then you can more effectively blend with your loved one in spirit and blend with the living people around you in this human experience, because that's what it's about. And so often a loved one in spirit will be like, I'm so glad you're here. I'm sorry you're having to deal with so and so, but look what the amazing progress you have made in helping our daughter. You know, like there's stuff like that that comes through, and that it, it's what a moment of joy and praise to know that they're there for those things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not missing. That's a lot of times people say, are they missing all these beautiful moments that I'm experiencing here? With our children, with our grandchildren. I feel so sad that they're missing all that. They're not. And just knowing that they're present for when it counts. They
When
absolutely
it
are present.
counts.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we have to be realistic about this. I said this to clients. You know, your son rarely came home when he was alive. Why would you think that he's gonna be like at your beck and call, mom, mom, mom? Like that wasn't how your son was. That wasn't how, so they're like, oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said that, well, this is more likely the way he would come through because this is what he's showing me. Oh my gosh, you're right. Like so it's like people forget who
What it
who
was
their
like.
folks in spirit are in that sense because they just want them so badly. And sometimes that is because they wanted that connection so badly when they were living.
That's right. Yeah.
You know,
So
so it just depends, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's always interesting even after all these decades of connecting, helping people with their loved ones in spirit. It doesn't get old.
never. There's so much to learn, so much
Yeah.
to experience with these connections. And
Yeah. Any last things you'd like to share with folks today before we close? Because I know we've covered the ground in terms of soul progression of the client, a lot of those stages that people are going through. And, for those of you who are tuning in today, if there's a stage that you feel like you're in, hey, put that into the chat. I'd love to hear from you what stage you think you are in and how you know that you're there, or what you felt in a particular stage, something that would help other people that are reading in the chat later on about things. I think it's great because this is a spiritual conversation, and just know there's going to be more to this whole process.
yeah.
And go ahead, Laura. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, um, I mean, there's so many different types of grief people are experiencing right now, and whether it be a physical loss or loss of situations in life, that it's all so many different types of grief. And the one thing I keep trying to remind people is, like, just try to find a moment of joy in everything, no matter how dark things seem or how challenging things are in your life right now, to always look towards moments of joy, because that will sustain you and that will raise your vibration and raise your energy, and sustain your energy, to be present for when things aren't as easy to get through. So find the moments of joy, no matter how small.
Yes, beautiful. I appreciate you telling people. I almost forgot. I have an upcoming class about uh, that is a complement to what we've just been talking about in terms of the stages of the soul journey. It's got guided meditations in it, and so a workshop. So you can find more information about that on my website, and also my Facebook page. So just know that that's an upcoming class for those of you who are in these kinds of stages, whether you're a client or maybe if you're a developing medium and you want to know more about those things and helping other people. It'll help you to transcend what you're going through, and in a confident, measured way, because I've had to guide several clients through this through the years. So I'm excited to offer that class. And for those of you who want to find Laura, tell them your website name so they can find
At
you.
laurawooster.com. Simple as
Wonderful.
that.
Yes. And then it's also posted in the information for this particular episode. Well, thanks for coming back on the show today, Laura. It's been wonderful to chat with you about the soul progression of the client. And it's an ongoing process. Don't lose heart, anyone who's through that, going through it. You're going to get yourself through the stages. It's not an if, it's a when. And just know that you're so guided, so loved, and supported by the divine in this process and your loved ones in spirit. And we're so grateful that you tuned in today. Please like, share, subscribe to the show. Let us know you loved it. I'm continually bringing through this education for other people, and I'd love to keep the show going. So please show your support by doing those like, share, subscribe, follow things, because then I can keep bringing you more great topics and great guests. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Bye bye.